It's like a joke in our family. We're like, oh, we're 20 minutes into dinner and Morgan hasn't brought up poop. Hello, everyone. Today, I am super excited to be sitting down with world-renowned genetics professor, Dr. Tim Spector. He's published more than 900 research articles and famous for his work studying twins, genetics, the microbiome, and diet. Most recently, he's co-founded the Zoe Nutrition Company, an app that brings together blood sugar, blood fat, and microbiome information. They are also the company behind the famous Blue Poop Challenge, which we're going to learn more about today. And they recently introduced an award-winning COVID symptoms study app that allows millions of users to share their daily symptoms, help us learn more about COVID-19 and its differences from the common cold or the flu. Within 24 hours, this app was downloaded over 1 million times, so we can't wait to hear how he achieved such success with that. We're going to talk about the impact of the microbiome, the groundbreaking work the Zoe team is doing on bringing that information into your living room. Tim has written 3 books, Spoon-Fed, Identically Different, and his most popular, The Diet Myth. Before we talk poop, COVID, microbiome, and twins, a quick reminder, any and all opinions and views shared by hosts and guests on this podcast are the speaker's own and do not represent the view of Primal Kitchen or its affiliates or parent company. Whew! Hello, Tim.
Hello.
Hello.
Finally, good to talk.
Yeah, I know. I was joking with Tim before this that just the research alone it took to write his intro was exhausting for me. So I'm thrilled to have Tim here. He's someone I've been most excited to talk to for all the reasons mentioned above. So let's get into it. So Tim, you are famous for your study on twins. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, I've been studying twins for about 30 years now. And this started as a small project and ended up as 14,000 twins all across the UK, and who have been studied more detail than any other sets of twins in the world. And really, the first 10 years of my career was really finding which elements of being a twin were genetic and which were due to the environment. And so back when I started in the 90s, we thought a lot of everything was just general wear and tear and aging, and only rare diseases were thought to be genetic. And so a lot of it was introducing people to the idea that genes were really important in common diseases, and the fact that back pain was 3 times more genetic than breast cancer, was the sort of thing I was doing. And then I got, and we obviously discovered hundreds of genes on the way, and pioneered some of the early genetic testing and things like that, because twins were this ideal group. And in the UK, they've just been amazingly altruistic. They all do it for free, and they come in for like an annual checkup and things. So it's been great fun, and it's a way I started life as a rheumatologist, but very quickly I just learned to get excited in all areas of biology and medicine, because we had the same method. By studying twins, you could take pairs of identical twins and pairs of non-identical twins and look at the differences between them. And if there was more similar in the identical twins compared to the non-identical, you say, wow, that's genetic, and it can't be anything else. And that was really fantastically fun for the first sort of 10, 15 years. Then we found lots of genes. Then I started getting more interested in why identical twins were often different. And, we look at identical twins and they have exactly the same expressions on the face, and the public go, wow, they're amazing. And they pick up a teacup or a beer with the same fingers and have the same laughs and expressions. But more seriously, they die of different diseases. They get different cancers. They get different autoimmune diseases. And so they're much more different than people think. And that led to me thinking, well, why is that? Because they have identical genes in every cell in their body. What else might be different? And I looked at something called epigenetics, which some of the listeners might know about, which is how you have chemical signals which can slightly alter your genes, and that can tweak what's going on. But I realized that wasn't a major factor. It was only when we got into looking at their gut microbes through poo samples that we saw that's where the big difference was. And in a way, that change about 12 years ago really shifted my whole research idea to thinking that if the one thing that's most different about identical twins that are different for, say, obesity, weight, or depression, or diabetes, then this could be the key to unlocking why all of us, vary in ways much more than just our genes. And so that really got me into this whole area of nutrition and the microbiome, and started me writing books and, becoming really a microbiome center and focusing the twin work on that. And that's really what's driven me. But each time you want to look at something, anything from nutrition to religion to politics to sexuality, or you can look in twins and get a really good idea of what's going on and what drives that particular thing you're looking at. So it's been a fantastic tool. I've been incredibly lucky in my career to have that, which means I can sort of study pretty much anything I want that's common. And that's a unique thing for a scientist to have.
So cool. Okay, so you have to unload that a little bit for us here. So you just mentioned, all the things we're not supposed to talk about: sexuality, politics, religion. How did that come into the twin study? Because I love talking about things we're not supposed to talk about. So this is my favorite.
I'm always interested in being slightly, out there and controversial and upsetting people about their prejudices, and so I'm always keen to study things that no one else wants to study. So as you can imagine, sex, politics, and religion are sort of you don't get much better than that. So some of this was to get publicity for the twins, so we'd get more people recruited. Other times it was just to work in an area where no research is done. So like sexuality, we looked at the genetics of heterosexuality, homosexuality, found that both in men and women there was a genetic component. And we also looked at libido and number of sexual partners, and found that was also genetic. And we actually even looked at things like the female orgasm, which we're not supposed to talk about either, but and found that we couldn't find any genes for that, which is interesting. So
the female orgasm still remains a mystery.
Yes,
but
very much. But we did get some amazing data on how much it varied between people. So huge variations. So it remains a mystery.
Yeah, yes, of course. So this group of listeners has done stuff like, like I downloaded my raw data from 23andMe years ago before they stopped interpreting data for you on 23andMe, and then uploaded it to the Sterling Report or put it into Rhonda Patrick's, Found My Fitness thing. So are there actually like genetic SNPs that are like how does this show up to where you could predict someone's sexuality, for instance?
Well, in a way, all the findings we're looking at in common traits like sexuality, or even things like conservative views, whether you vote Republican or Democrat, or whether you believe in God, come down to seeing that there are genes involved in it, but we can't define. We can usually find a few gene markers that are associated with it, but we never get close enough to be able to predict with more than 51% versus 49% exactly what's going on. And in a way, that's the problem of 23andMe, and the problem of common disease genetics is that we don't have that knockout single gene because there's so many genes involved. We're much more complicated as human beings than we've been led to believe. And so in a way, that was a bit of a fallacy of the genetic era, which I was a part of. So I'm partly to blame, thinking that we could explain all these diseases with a single gene marker or whatever. And that's a lot of these genetic testing companies, that's what they still offering. They're trying to really con people to think, it's like you can understand your diet just by doing a few gene tests. Well, that's as ridiculous as saying just by doing this we can understand cancer or depression or whether you're going to gain weight or not, or which way you're going to vote in the next election. So so there's a real big difference at the moment between understanding that something has a genetic basis or an environmental basis or a family basis, to actually saying you can predict it with our genetic material. And that's in a way why I'm moving away from genetics in my career and science and moving towards things that I think are more actionable. And that's why I've got really interested in the gut microbes. And suddenly, the fact that they are, predictive of health. And the nice thing is you can change them with diet and lifestyle.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great. Well, let's segue into that then. So that led you to your work with Zoe, correct?
Yeah. So once I worked out the microbes are important, I started obviously publishing stuff on this and doing big twin studies. And I was giving a talk on my book, The Diet Myth, and two guys in the audience came to see me after and said, "We love what you're doing. We'd like to fund you to start a company that could use the microbes plus this new idea of nutrition in a personalized way, using big data." And I said, I'm only interested if you're really going to fund proper research, and this is going to cost you millions of dollars, and thought I'd never see them again. But they came back 2 weeks later, said, "Yeah, we've got some seed money. We're happy to spend the money on real research first," whereas most companies just spend the money on marketing. And that, to me, was the reason why I said, well, I can combine doing real science, progressing, things forward, and at the same time have an objective at the end in a few years' time of having a commercial product that might help people's lives. So to me, that was more interesting than writing yet another academic paper, my 1000th paper, which no longer had the same excitement. And so I wanted to do something with all this, make something practical out of all this massive information that's coming out of genes and microbes and glucose monitors and fat levels and things, which, this really exciting new technology.
Yeah.
And that's so we got Zoe together, and then spent 3 years really doing these predict studies, which, the world's largest nutrition intervention studies, to really get the baseline data to base products on, rather than just taking it from other people's studies, which is what traditionally companies in this space do, with the exception maybe of 23andMe, but in a way that they started that way as well.
Yeah. Okay. So what's a predict study?
So the predict study is a massive scale intervention study where you take normal people and feed them a range of identical meals and see how they respond to that food. The old idea was that everyone responded the same way, maybe males and females slightly differently, but otherwise, one size fits all. And so we gave people standard meals, set muffins, and told them to eat it for breakfast at particular times, and asked them to log all their food for 2 weeks. And we gave them continuous glucose monitors. We gave them blood prick testing for blood fats, and we looked at inflammation levels, and we asked them to log how they felt before and after every meal in terms of hunger and energy levels, etc. And then we took our microbe samples at the beginning and end of that test, and we did this in samples that no one else has done on that scale before. So over 1,000 people in the UK and in the US, involving my hospital at King's and Mass General in Boston. And basically we got these amazing results that we weren't expecting, that you give identical meals to people and there's an 8-fold difference in the blood responses to that food in normal people. And that really was a real aha moment to say, well, that's huge variability. If we can predict that and tell people what type of person they are, this is going to be huge in terms of intervention. And then the second big insight was that we had over 600 twins in the group, and so we found that even identical twins had very different responses to food. And no one's ever looked at that before. So, and we published this, not in just some PR blog, but in Nature Medicine, which is one of the top journals in the world, because, the ethos of the company is very much to get the science first and spread the word. Also, making sure that people do believe the results are based on real science, not just marketing. And so that was the essence of that very first study. And then that is just the very start. And that was 3 years ago now, I think. And then the second publication we did was looking at the gut microbes of those same people. And there was a clear link between the composition of the microbes and the responses to foods. And we could put those together and predict, based on those set meals, we could predict how people will respond to any particular food with about 80% certainty, which is pretty good going for any predictive test. And we also found that we could start to identify good and bad bugs that were associated with certain foods. And so we have 30 bugs that are really quite common to most people. And we can work out for any individual which foods will boost those bugs and the good ones and suppress the bad ones. So the more data we get, the better our predictions are becoming. And we've now got data on over 10,000 people, and it's sort of doubling every 3 months. So it's a really exciting science project that's also having practical implications, because we now have, for the last 6 months, we've had a product in the US that's based on this data and is also providing us with more data. So we're getting better and better predictions, and we're continually improving the algorithms and what we're doing, because the idea, and I think you've had a go at this, but you haven't had your results yet. For the product is you get a score for all your foods based on your response to sugars, your response to fat, and your gut microbiome. And it's that more holistic approach to food that is what we've taken from the studies. So there isn't just one thing that affects it. You've got to try and put all these things in, plus lifestyle factors are important, exercise, sleep, and being male or female, your age, all these things are also important in how you metabolize food, and that's what we're putting into this. So it's really a big data approach that's super exciting, and we're making discoveries every week on this because no one has really looked. Everyone's always been looked at blood tests in fasting levels in the morning. You go to your doctors, they just take your cholesterol, your sugars, everything is that you must be fasting, and everyone's actually very similar. And it's only when you stimulate it that actually you see these really huge differences between people. And so the idea that is, and I think this is when we started, and it's actually become more ingrained in mainstream medicine now, is that these sugar peaks, these fat peaks in your body, all cause inflammation, and that inflammation is a chronic stress on your body. And so if you can reduce these short-term stresses, you reduce the long-term stress, and that's going to help metabolism, weight loss, all kinds of other stuff. But it's been really fascinating, because we've seen some twins that respond well to fats, and others, and the other twin will respond well to sugars. And so it's really showing that one size fits all diets just don't work. And I think that's it's starting to fit in with some of the clinical trials now, where you don't see clear differences between high fat diets and high carb diets, because there's individual variation. Some people, which you probably know that some people keto diets really suit, and others they just can't hack it. They feel terrible. And it's probably related to how all of us respond differently to food. So I think this whole idea of personalized nutrition is, it's inevitably going to be mainstream. The idea there'll be these guidelines for everybody about what percentage of fat or sugars, is clearly nonsense. And everyone's going to have to start doing their own form of experiments to work out what suits them.
For sure. And I'm like one of those experimenters, right? So I've been super low carb. I was pescatarian. I was vegetarian when I got my yoga certification in Hawaii. I've been keto, the whole thing, right? And this is probably why this war between vegans and paleo folks rages on, because you've got data to support both diets in some sense, right? So it's so interesting. But I think for me, I've done, levels. I've done biome, testing my microbes. My functional medicine doctor did a stool test. I don't know, in January. I just sent in my samples for you guys last week. I'd be very curious to hear how that goes. But I think, anyone who's super interested in their health is on this quest to find the right diet for them, right? I mean, that's the ultimate goal. And so it sounds like what you guys are doing is really taking in multiple inputs to provide that information to the user so we can more easily determine what is the right diet for us. Am I correct there?
Yeah, that's absolutely the goal. Yeah, we think everyone has the right to work out what diet is right for their particular biology, and it's not only the foods you eat, but it's also we're moving towards working out, how you eat, how many times a day you eat, whether, how long your overnight fast is. And we think everyone's going to be different on this. This is all our preliminary data is showing that, there are some people like myself that metabolize food better in the evenings, right? Whereas most people metabolize it better in the mornings.
So that would be shown as what, less of a glucose spike, for instance, or how would you quantify that?
Yeah, so I did some experiments where I was eating these Zoe muffins, and every 4 hours, and it turned out that most people were getting a higher spike as the day went on, but mine went down. So
I'm like you as well. I could eat,
but we're the minority, So it's
ice cream for dinner and I'm fine, but in the morning I have fruit and I'm like through the roof.
Yeah, so and that led me to question whether really I should be, having quite as much breakfast, and so 2 or 3 times a week I now skip breakfast and use that to have an overnight fast. So I think some people instinctively know what's good for them, but I think with this new technology and these tests, you can actually see for yourself, quantify it. And I think it's this is really exciting stuff as we're heading towards these really new areas, but we're unraveling it much faster than the decades it's taken nutrition to get, where we are at the moment. It's going at warp speed, and it's super exciting. So I'm learning, I've learned so much about myself just by doing these tests and looking at the results we're seeing, and trying to work out so I've upped my fat levels. I've completely changed what I used to eat in the hospital for lunch, and I realized,
what are you eating now versus what did you used to eat?
Well, my 10 years ago, my breakfast used to be a sort of muesli granola healthy mix, with some low-fat milk and an orange juice, and some tea. And now it's high-fat yogurt, mixed nuts, seeds, and some berries with a black coffee. And not only does that help my glucose scores, but my lipid scores don't go up, and I don't get hungry, 4 hours later, because I don't get a sugar dip. And so that's one example. But I used to have a lunch in the hospital every day with a brown tuna sandwich and sweet corn. with some potato chips and maybe a small Tropicana. And, that when I saw what I put a glucose monitor as I had that meal, and, I was way into the diabetic range, it was like terrible. And so now it's, it would be plant-based salads, things that aren't going to give me a sugar spike. Lots of nuts and seeds, apples, pears for lunch. And I generally have a light lunch, and then my main meal is in the evening. And I'm mainly plant-based. I have meat once or twice a month, just for my B12 levels, and because I have a problem with meat on the environmental basis more than the health basis now. And I found it suits me. As I wrote in the Diet Myth and Spoon Fed, there's nothing wrong with meat per se if it's good quality and you don't have massive amounts of it. Most people, but it doesn't always leave room on the plate for plants. So it's a sort of it's moving away from this all or nothing idea, and it's trying to work out, well, instead of what. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So meat instead of potatoes or fries, great. But if it's instead of a variety of plants and nuts and seeds, well, maybe not, because that is so. But all this stuff is evolving, and my diet is still evolving. I'm not, I don't think I have yet the optimum diet for myself, and like you, I'm still experimenting. So it's a journey, and it's going to change at different ages as well. There isn't necessarily one diet for everyone at all times of life. I think we have to realize that.
Yeah, I agree. I noticed that pregnant and breastfeeding, I needed very different things than I needed when, I wasn't pregnant or breastfeeding. Meat was one. I had a really hard time. I was very anemic. Like, I remember my OBGYN told me, you are profoundly anemic. And I was taking all these iron supplements. I could not get my levels up until I just started eating red meat multiple times a week, which wasn't something I was doing previously. But very quickly, I turned it around. So I can definitely relate there. Do you think like being plant-based is something that is specific to a certain genetic, like a certain type of diet? Are there like different profiles you have within the cohorts in the Zoe app, or do you feel like that's more of a universal thing?
Well, I think if you look at all the epidemiology studies, I don't think we've got enough data yet from extreme groups in the extreme vegans against extreme carnivores to really compare them in the Zoe program yet. We'd love to have them, so please do join up. But looking at the epidemiology studies of vegans and carnivores, it's looking like the health benefit is not necessarily any different between someone who has meat like myself 2 or 3 times a month, or once a week, and a total vegetarian. It's probably more about what else you put on your plate the rest of the time. So it's more about the complete meal rather than focusing on these one items as good or bad. And I think this is really where I'm moving to in my mindset is we're fixated on single items to try and simplify nutrition, and it's much more complex than that. Meat has carbs in it, and everything's a mixture, and all carbs are not the same, and yet we try and oversimplify everything and dumb it down when talking about calories, and it's, for me, it's all about, if the simple way to say is what's the best thing for your gut microbiome, and this to me is really important long term, because there are lots of diets that may work short term, but long term your health is really important, and virtually all the studies show that a diversity of plants is what's important for your long term gut health. And we did a study with the American Gut Project. We had the British Gut Project together, where it combined forces, and we found that when we looked at 11,000 people, the people who had the best gut health measured by microbes were people who were eating 30 different types of plant a week. And it didn't matter if you had fish, you had meat on top of it. That was the key metric in a way. And so I think that's really important, is that, I know like your listeners are really big into meat, but it doesn't mean you can't have a diversity of other things, even if it's in small amounts, because that's what we're learning here. Is it's not about necessarily the quantities. It's if you think of your gut microbiome like a garden, it's sprinkling on a little bit of fertilizer. It's not smothering it with nitrogen.
Yeah.
It's putting different amounts of lots of different seeds out there and sprinkling them on. Just on your salad, just sprinkling some nuts and seeds and herbs and spices and things like this. That it's getting a different mental state. It doesn't mean having had to have a giant glass of kale smoothie every day, which is what most people think of veganism. So I think if you think of it from a microbe point of view, I think that if they only eat meat, they wouldn't be so happy. And I've spent time in East Africa with some of these hunter-gatherers, and they eat a lot of meat, but they also eat a lot of variety of different meats. Hundreds of different species they'll be eating.
Yeah.
They also eat a lot of dirt every time they eat their meat, and it's a lot. They don't wash it a lot. They stick it straight on the fire, eat it with their hands, bits of fur in it, and things like this.
Yeah.
I'm not recommending that, but I'm just saying that's what they do. And but they're eating enormous amounts of nuts and berries and seeds and tubers, and getting 3 times the American average of fiber every day. So that combination works very well for them. They just don't get common diseases. So I think to me the sweet spot of nutrition is somewhere between these extremes. There might be some people who really do well on these extremes. Most people are going to find themselves somewhere on the spectrum, and you've got to work out what the common denominators are of the healthy groups around the world as a basis, and then on top of that, personalize it, for you and your particular circumstances.
Yeah. So Zoe will tell me what my microbiome diversity looks like. That's what I'm hearing, right?
Yeah, but it's not focusing on that uniquely. So it's saying,
yeah, of course,
but that's one part of it, and it'll give you advice about which foods to eat to boost the good guys and suppress the bad guys. So we've got these 30 microbes that we've isolated that pretty much work in everybody, and you want to get that balance of the good guys and the bad guys. And this is particularly interesting for big meat eaters, because there are some meat eaters that have a set of microbes that converts the meats to some harmful chemicals. This whole idea, they're called TMAO is the chemical, whereas others have a different set of microbes that don't convert the meat choline and proteins to this harmful chemical, and then the theory is they never get any heart disease consequences. So again, in the future, I think we'll be looking at how we can maybe personalize people who can eat a lot of meat quite safely, and others that might end up having problems or might need to change their microbes, or you might be able to buy a special probiotic pack in the future that would tweak your microbes so that they don't produce this chemical side effect, if you like. So it's really interesting. But I think at the moment, my view for meat eaters is, by all means carry on eating your meat, but do look to try and do all the things you do to keep your gut microbiome going, because that's the thing that's going to look after you long term, good for your immunity, fighting COVID, staying slimmer, fighting cancer, all these kind of things that are important. So I think we need to just, and we're just finding our way here about what that balance is. and things like, not only the variety of foods, but also things like fermented foods. Whether you're into dairy or not, there is now a fermented food for nearly everybody, whether it's yogurt, kefir, kombucha, kimchi, the 4Ks, kraut. These are all extra things. And then, of course, if you are going to pick, if you want plants, I always say go for try and understand more about food and understand what the good things on food are. So take an iceberg lettuce, for example, has no nutrients at all, nothing. Completely, its only good thing is it lasts in your fridge for 3 weeks without going rotten,
Yep.
But pick brightly colored vegetables that have polyphenol chemicals in them that are good for your microbes. So pick berries, brightly colored things as well, and you probably don't need to have a lot of them. It's just that diversity that's important. So these are some of the things where we're learning and we're trying to incorporate this into this advice that we're giving people. So there's obviously some generic advice, and there's also this highly personalized one, which at the moment is relating more about how you respond to fats, how you respond to carbs. How do you get that right balance? What's your threshold for eating fats that you might want to avoid? And I have a particular problem with my fat levels. I have, when I test for Zoe, I have very good microbiome scores. I have very bad sugar scores and bad fat scores. Right? So I'm sort of always trying on a bit of a tightrope to say what I can do. But obviously I'm just trying to eat mainly fat, but just keep below a certain threshold, because what I don't want is at 6 hours to have really high fat levels in my blood, which will trigger inflammation. So it's trying to work out for yourself how you do that while still enjoying food. So let's not forget that one of the great pleasures in life is food, and we mustn't get too obsessed with it. A tasty whole food, is always going to be good. And that's why, I never have low fat, low carb, low calorie anything anymore. Yeah. Nothing with artificial sweeteners.
Yeah. Mark, our founder, always says there's so few pleasures left in life, food and sex being two of them. So I'm all for that, making sure that it's still pleasurable. But I'm also all for optimizing.
I'm just saying that's a bit the Zoe philosophy is also, we give people these diet plans based on their results. And we say, listen, it's not about cutting anything out. It's about what are alternatives that are good for you. It's about, like for me, swapping my banana for an apple. It's something as simple as that. It's, rather than have grapes, have an orange, which and for other people, it might be the complete opposite. So it's not about calories. We don't talk about calories really in any of the advice we give. I think calories are evil, and really we should be banning them. It's a way that food companies get to disguise rubbish food. They can just talk about the calorie, and then you don't actually care what the contents are. So
100-calorie snack pack. Mm-hmm. Interesting. So you don't think calories matter?
No. Within reason, no. I mean, obviously, there's less calories in spinach than there are in French fries, but we all know that. I think, obviously, calories are a fact. I'm not a calorie denier. It's like they exist, right? But the way they're used so much in marketing and foods and in supermarkets, and we're just confronted, low cal this, low cal that, count your calories. No diets have worked where people count calories. I mean, and if you restrict calories, your body responds by wanting to eat more. And so it's a total fallacy. And we have to start moving away from calories to food quality. And that's the key. A good example is we came out of the PREDICT studies. We were looking at sugar dips. Most people focus on sugar peaks, but for years, anecdotally, people have been telling me, I get a dip about 10 or 11 in the morning and I feel a bit woozy, and then I feel hungry, and then I eat something and I'm better. We actually looked, and 1 in 4 people have these dips, generally unknown to them. So we looked at these, and people who are consistently have a sugar dip after a carb breakfast, I end up being significantly hungrier and more tired 3 hours later. And in that day, they will eat an extra 300 calories. And we were giving people identical muffins. Some people got a dip with it, others didn't. Those muffins have identical calories, but have very different effects on 2 people. And that's really the point of this, is why our fixation with calories is really so wrong. And I think that's an amazing insight once you start to realize, so I need to know how I respond. Am I going to have a dip? Am I going to have a fat peak later? All these things are going to influence it much more than whether it's exact calories, which you can't measure anyway, which aren't accurate, and your body will metabolize differently. So I think anyone who's talking about calories as the mainstay of their diet really is missing the point, and it means they're on highly processed food marketed by junk food companies. And if it says low cal, avoid it like the plague, because it just means high chemical.
Absolutely. We're with you on that 100%. So these dips and this blood sugar response, I have 2 questions. One, I want to know blood fat. I mean, blood sugar is something we're very familiar with measuring, right? And I think microbiome, this audience probably is to a certain extent too, but I want to talk about the measurement of blood fat. And then I also want to know why some people respond to sugar and fat differently than others. I guess I'm curious. Is it because, I grew up on Pop-Tarts and, macaroni and cheese, and I've abused my body, and now at 37, I can't handle blood sugar? What are what is causing these differences among populations? So fill us in on those 2 things: difference between blood sugar and blood fat, and also why.
Okay, so the blood sugar, most people probably know about insulin, glucose. It goes up after about 20, 30 minutes. Generally, you get a peak, and you easily measure blood sugar, and it's also a surrogate for insulin levels. And we did measure them both in the PREDICT study, but the sugars are fine for that. And then it generally goes down within a couple of hours. It's generally dropped again, and that's why we're interested in the sugar dip at 3 hours, which was longer than anyone had ever looked. That's why I hadn't seen it. So there are these different patterns which might mean something, and so that's well known. That's what's measured continuously in your glucose monitor. Now, for blood fat, everything happens much slower. So it takes about 5 hours for things to happen in terms of your blood fats, because it gets absorbed lower down in the intestine, has to get there, and it gets absorbed in the small intestine, and then gets into the blood, and then starts to bring up the triglyceride levels, which is the one that we measure is the most responsive immediately. And that's what we measure in our tests. You can measure it in the blood or as a finger spot on a bit of card. And what we found is that 6 hours after your meal, healthy people had got their fat levels were back to pretty much normal. Okay, so it started to rise 3 to 4 hours, and then by 6 hours, generally they'd be returning to normal and be flushed out of the system. But some people like me and others much worse than me were still going up at 6 hours. So this means that the fat was hanging around in the blood vessels, and the longer it hangs around, the more you get these small particles breaking off, and they get embedded in the vessel wall. They cause inflammation. So we don't want fat hanging around a long time after meals. And it seems that some people can clear it really fast. Other people it takes a long time to clear it. And the mechanisms for sugar and fat are quite different, and we didn't show. Some people have thought that they're identical, that you have the same system, but no, they're very different. And some people have good sugar, get rid of sugar quickly, their insulin's working well, but they can't get rid of fat, and vice versa. So why are they different? Why do people differ? Some of it's genetic for sugars. So 30% roughly had a genetic component. So you might have some genes. You might have got some diabetic type genes from your parents, and that will have stimulated that. Age makes a big effect on it. Exercise also changes it, and some people, interestingly, do better if they exercise before meals, and some people exercise after meals. We've done some tests on that. That's really interesting. And the other factor, of course, is the gut microbes, the composition of those, through mechanisms we have no clue how it works, but it does on blood sugar. So they're the main things. There's a bit on sleep as well. So if you've had a good night's sleep, you'll get rid of your sugar quicker. If you've had only a few hours, or you've been up all night partying, you're going to have a bigger sugar peak in the morning. So all kinds of things influence these peaks and why they're different between people. Then in fat, there was no genetic component at all in fat. That was really strange. So zero genetics. And a bigger component actually of the microbes affecting how you get rid of fat. And that, for people who understand a bit of the biology, that's often the bile salts, the gallbladder, all these things are, the chemicals in there are all helped by your microbes to break down the fats. And there are the fat-producing microbes particularly that some people have and others don't, we think are important. So and again, we did find to a lesser extent exercise and sleep influence fat. There's still a lot we don't understand why people are different. And we haven't studied enough different populations to know, do Japanese people digest fat better than Americans? We don't know that yet. Some differences between sexes as well as age. But again, we're teasing it apart, and we're learning more all the time on that.
So fascinating. So the mechanisms that are contributing to both these is completely different, almost, it seems, between blood sugar and blood
sugars and fats. Yes. Obviously there are some people, to some extent they're correlated, because sometimes if you've got a tendency to type 2 diabetes, or you're very overweight, you will push up your sugar scores, and that also will impact your blood fat levels as well. So many people who are unhealthy will have bad responses to both.
Yeah. So
that at a certain level there's a correlation, but I don't think it's caused by the same mechanisms.
Interesting. And you measure the blood fat, is that through the finger prick test, right?
Yes. At the moment, there isn't a continuous blood fat device. If someone wants to invent one, I'd love to take it off your hands, because it'd be fantastic to see that. But I think that's the interesting thing, particularly for people who eat a lot of meat. Might be some of them that are getting a very high fat response after it, and others might be absolutely fine. And I think that's a really interesting element of personalization. And there might be different meats that cause different amounts of fat response as well. And it might be also, and how you eat the meat, whether you have it with plenty of fiber or not, or whether you have it on its own, might also affect those fat levels. So I think there's plenty of other research to tease that out in this area.
I love it. And then you mentioned inflammation. So are you determining inflammation through C-reactive protein, or what metric is the contributing, or how are you determining inflammation, I guess?
Well, what we published this paper. So in the PREDICT studies, we obviously measured hundreds of different blood tests that we aren't doing in the commercial product, and we showed that at 6 hours the fat triglyceride level was related to something called one of the interleukin 6, which is a cytokine, but it's very unstable. It's not very useful for testing. But we found that another sugar called glyc A, which we measured as a package of something called metabolomics, where you measure hundreds of chemicals, was a much more consistent marker of inflammation. And what we found is that rise in triglyceride at 6 hours was highly correlated with this inflammatory marker. So that's why this is one of the first studies to show that a sharp rise in fat levels does trigger this inflammation in the body. And that is yet another reason to really want to limit fat peaks as well as sugar peaks. But we don't routinely measure it in the test. But if you get a triglyceride reading, you can be pretty sure that's high. That means you're also getting inflammation.
Absolutely. Okay, I have a question. This is a personal question. I'm just going to preface it, so take it for what it's worth. SIBO. What do you know about SIBO? Small intestinal bacterial overgrowth.
I know that everyone asks me about it, and there's very little known about it. It's one of the most unusual conditions in the body because it's so hard to study. So it's one place in the body that's the hardest to get at and see what's going on. It's very hard to work out what the microbes are doing in the small intestine. So this is small intestinal bowel overgrowth for those who don't know what we're talking about. And it's been blamed on all kinds of problems. But I think it's important it's been overblown by alternative practitioners, particularly because it's an easy thing to blame because you can't really study it to rule things out or rule it in. And the treatments are very, very hard to know if they work or not. There have been things like antibiotic treatments that have had some benefits, others not. I'm a bit skeptical about most of the research in this area, just because it is so very hard to do, and there haven't been really good trials. I mean, I think there are some people who generally do have this problem, but many more people who have been told they have it who probably don't, and they just have generally poor gut microbiomes. Interestingly, we have a paper coming out soon that did look where in the twins, we sampled through biopsies all parts of their intestines. So we got several hundred twins to have colonoscopies, and we looked at everything. And there is a general correlation between the microbes. They're not the same communities, but they correlate. And so we think that if you want to know what's going on with SIBO, rather than have invasive surgery or wacky test, your gut microbes in your lower colon are pretty good at give you an idea of what's going on up above. Yeah. So I think at the moment, that's my better thing is to say, well, let's just say it's part of the spectrum of people with poor gut health and try and work out how we can deal with it through dietary manipulation rather than just hitting it with antibiotics, which could have lots of other bad effects on the body, as we know.
Yeah. Very interesting. So how, besides eating a plant-rich diet, huge diversity, how can we change our microbiome? Or is that the only
way? We see dramatic effects when people give up ultra-processed foods. And so I think that's the first thing everyone does. I mean, the average person in the US has 60% of their calories from ultra-processed foods. And so that's the first thing really you need to say is, is what you're eating a whole food? We all eat some processed foods. I mean, nobody's so pure that they don't do that. And I'm all for the occasional treat, but it shouldn't be part of your daily diet. And so that's the first thing to get rid of. Try and get rid of artificial sweeteners, get rid of all those chemicals you've never heard of and you wouldn't have in your kitchen. Studying whole foods, improve your fiber. We need to be getting up towards those hunter-gatherer levels of fiber, which is about 70 grams a day, and most people in the US are about 15. So there's a way to go on that. We've talked about fermented foods. Many people may not be keen on that because they've tasted one and they didn't like it, or it's, there can be sour tastes. But don't forget that cheese is a pretty good fermented food. And again, if you go for the artisan varieties rather than the processed ones, you're sure you're getting microbes, nice smelly blue cheese with a rind. You're getting plenty of probiotics in that. Again, pick a rainbow of colors for your foods. And then, of course, we talked briefly on this, but I'm a fan of experimenting with restricted time eating, and the evidence is still mainly in mice. Just to be clear, large-scale human studies have only shown improvements in metabolism, not in weight. But I think it could well be personalized. So some people will do well on this and others won't. So I would certainly tell anyone who hasn't tried it to give it a go, and try skipping breakfast is the easiest thing to do a couple of days a week and see how you feel. Generally, the clinical trials show that people who skip breakfast actually lose weight long term rather than gain weight, which is what one of the myths we were taught at medical school. So I think experiment with ways of eating as well as what you put on your plate, and rather than focusing on one item, just try and think of it in a more holistic way. So you're looking at all the foods together rather than obsessing about one particular piece. It really is the whole package that's really important. And generally go for high quality, tasty stuff. Eating your food and enjoying it and spending more time eating it is also important. All the countries that spend time eating their food, like France, Italy, Spain, Japan, South Korea, are healthier than Americans and Brits that race through their meals. And so that don't eat in your car, all this other kind of stuff. Food is there to be enjoyed. And don't just take some snack just because it says high protein on it. It's still ultra processed rubbish. I think they're my life tips. And experiment. Take advantage of things like the Zoe test. Get yourself tested, and keep updated with the latest technology and information. But keep an open mind, because it's a fast changing field. I think that's the thing. And there isn't one diet, as we discussed, that's right for every time in your life. You might have been on it for 10 years, but is it still right for you now? We don't know.
Yeah. Okay. And what's with the blue poop challenge?
This came out of the PREDICT study. So to measure the microbiome correctly, you need to work out how long it takes food to get from one end of the gut to the other, because you need to adjust for it. It's complicated why, but that's what you need to do. So we gave the participants, 1,000 people, we gave them a blue muffin, bright blue muffin with food dye in it, and asked them to time when it came out the other end. And it's bright blue because you notice it when it hits the pan. You can't mistake it for anything else. And we did that, and we came up with a surprising fact that it correlated really well with the gut microbes, the health of your gut microbes. So the longer your transit time, the worse on average your gut microbes. So it's a sort of cheap home test for people who want to know roughly how their gut microbes are. And it's also a sign that you might need to do something, because we found the average American had a transit time of about 28 to 29 hours. And many people were 2 to 4 days.
Wow.
And that is a long time. And we think that we think the optimum is somewhere between 10 and 20 hours. So a lot of people can improve. So everyone can go on and go to the either joinzoe.com website, or they can go to just hashtag Blue Poop Challenge and find that, get some recipes, or they can get some muffins sent to them. You do the time yourself and your family, and see if you can do better than the US average, or you're worse. And this is a sign that you need to improve your fiber. You need to change some other things in your diet. And you can take a quiz on the website, which will link you to your twin who has exactly the same transit time, same other characteristics, and they've been fully sequenced with the Zoe program, so you can see, well, this is what my microbes might look like. And then, of course, if you're interested, you might then want to follow up and have the full microbiome test if you're worried. But I think it's a way of getting Americans to talk about their poop more, not being embarrassed about it, being able to talk to their doctor in ways that they do in France and Italy. Well, I've worked there, and people are always discussing poo with their doctor, which we just don't do that. It's this Anglo-Saxon Puritan-y thing. I don't know. It's a bit of fun, but it's also got a serious educational message that there's more to your gut than just having tummy ache or bloating. It gives you an idea of what's going on inside, makes you think more holistically about what you eat, and I think that's hopefully what people will take out of it. And it's already the biggest sort of citizen science project of its kind. Hundreds of thousands of people, I think, have taken it, and so the more people can join, the more data we'll get, and work out what that sweet spot is for transit time, which might differ by sex, age, racial groups, all these kind of things, and where you live, and what your regular diet is. So it's fun.
Yeah. Us Americans, we're not naked at the beach. We don't talk about poop. There's a big cultural undertone here that we need to pick up on what Europe's doing right, that we are definitely not. Although I myself am it's like a joke in our family. We're like, oh, we're 20 minutes into dinner and Morgan hasn't brought up poop. This is a big deal. So I'm very excited to do the Blue Poop Challenge. I'm all for it. I think there's a lot to learn from our poop. And I have toddlers, so poop.
They love it. They love doing it. Yeah.
And
kids, they love talking about poop. Yeah.
They love talking about poop. There's definitely no lack of that. So fascinating. Okay, real quick, I just want everyone to know, because I feel like this Zoe thing is just so cool. So I'm even more impressed than I was when I wanted to interview at first, because the app is it's like if, I don't even know how to describe it. It's like if Apple and Tesla came together to combine a health app. Like it guides you through everything so seamlessly. There's day 1, day 2, you do your poop samples, you get these muffins in the mail. It asks for recent lab work. It just feels like, for me, the most comprehensive personalized medical program that's in existence today. Like, I don't think there's anyone else doing anything that has as much data input as you guys are doing at Zoe. Would you agree?
No, I agree 100%. And we're the only ones doing this holistic approach that realize it isn't just one thing. And it is this combination of data, and it's accumulating all this data, realizing that it's not simple. There isn't a simple, easy solution, but it is about gathering the data, giving it back to people, and it's a journey. It's not a one-off thing. So this is a journey we want to take together with the sort of people that want to do these Zoe experiments, and we want to get a long-term relationship with them that is going to, it's going to last years and decades as we improve the product and we try and interact and see what people want out of it as well. And the more people that do it, the more specific the advice, about which particular red meats might be useful, or which ones to avoid, or these particular complex meals, working out how they work. And so it's an exciting journey, and it's going to keep changing. And I think that's, we're following the science. We're not just saying this is it, we're stuck for the next 10 years with this plan. it's continually improving, evolving with the data. And nearly everyone that signs up also agrees to share their data with us, which we do in a secure, safe way, so we can use everyone's results together to keep pushing the science. So it's great fun, in all respects, really. And people who have done it, some of the things are interesting because because once you've done it, you haven't done this yet, but you'll get your results, and then you'll be offered a 4-week plan to just swap your meals around and see how you get on with using your scores. And virtually everyone is losing some weight, which is great. 6 pounds is good, but but the biggest change is actually people reporting energy levels being higher and reduced appetite. And these things we didn't actually expect. So we're starting to add that into the app to start thinking about, wow, this could be actually, do you pick the foods that give you more energy rather than anything else? Whereas, again, we've been obsessed with weight and calories, but actually there's many other aspects to eating, in a personalized way that we haven't always considered. So this will give us this data that, will keep pushing that forward.
I love it. And Zoe costs how much per month?
The current package is, I think it's about $50 something a month, and which is usually less than a gym membership, and it's less than a Starbucks a day. So
it's definitely less than doing. I've done levels, $200 a month, right? Just for the continuous glucose monitor and the insights there. So to be able to get the continuous glucose monitor plus a microbiome test plus this personalized recommendation for $59 to me is a steal. You can't get that kind of information from any other company for that price.
No, and if you went to your physician, it would cost you thousands of dollars, just to get any of these tests done, and it would be pretty impossible. But even if you could, I think we're able to do this because we're doing it at scale, and hopefully these things, it will get cheaper with time the more people use it. And we're doing everything to try and involve as many people as possible. So we don't want to keep this as an expensive product. We want millions of people to be using this. And
all right, I have some rapid fire questions for you. I know we're kind of running out of time here, but real quick before we get into that, 2 minutes on the COVID study. You've done explain just like 60 seconds on it and what your biggest takeaways have been for those folks. And I also want to know how the symptoms are changing in light of new variants. The new variants everyone's obsessed with. So yeah,
okay.
Fill us in.
Tough in 2 minutes, but okay. So basically, back in March last year, they closed down my university and hospital, and I got in touch with Zoe to say, could we convert the nutrition app team to working on the COVID project? And so the same team that developed the Zoe app for nutrition in 5 days came up with a COVID app for symptoms. And it was an amazing success through the social media. And we eventually got 4.5 million people to download and use the app. And even
quick,
now, 80
people in 24 hours to sign up for this app. Is that correct?
Yeah.
How on
it was. It went well. People just I don't know if you remember back then, but the governments were useless. No one was helping anyone. You were told not to call your doctor. This is an emergency. Stay at home. Lock your door. And so people just said, I can help, because we were telling people, give us your symptoms. Tell us what's going on. Have you had a test? Are you ill? And people just said, this is fantastic. It was the first day of lockdown in the UK. And it was just after in the US when we launched it. We did it a week later in the US. And people just loved the idea of participating, doing something, feeling they were part of a community and getting data back. And so that's really what drove it and why it's still, the biggest project of its kind, nearly 18 months on. So I think it's been and it's helped us realize how to interact with the public in a way and really listen to them And people are sick of just putting data in and not getting feedback. And so that's really the core of what the COVID app is, giving the users of the app the latest data on what's happening in their area, etc. We also did a huge study, about 1 million people. We were able to do a study of 1 million people in a week, right? Incredible, on diet. And that told us that the quality of your diet has a huge impact on whether you get severe COVID or not. And again, it's true in the US population as well as the UK. So, as well as obesity and diabetes being problems, diet quality, and that probably explains some of these inequalities in health. But again, another focus about, if you want to get your vaccine to work and all this saying, diet quality is really crucial now more than ever, because the microbes have this huge effect on your immune system. And finally, the big thing we've done is discover new symptoms. So we were the first really big study to show that loss of smell was part of COVID, loss of taste, delirium in the elderly, that kids had different symptoms. And currently we're showing that with people with vaccinations, they're getting cold-like symptoms. So we're not seeing the same symptoms as we did. People in the UK and the US now are getting reinfected, even with vaccines, but don't expect the classical symptoms. You're going to get sneezing, headaches, sore throat, and you're not going to get shortness of breath, fever, as you were before. So it's like a flu-like illness. And we can't at the moment, it's quite hard for us to separate out Delta and Alpha. But we do know that Delta is affecting the vaccines more. So you're getting more breakthrough with the vaccines than you were with the early versions. So, unfortunately, COVID's going to be with us for another couple of years. And we just got to learn to live with it and, accept it, do everything we can, exercise and good food, and looking after our bodies to make sure that we don't get it too badly.
For sure.
That's the 2-minute version.
I love it.
We have a website if people want to go to it. They can look at all the COVID stuff and our latest stuff and log on.
Yeah, I did recently. Someone was mentioning that some obscene proportion of people who are hospitalized or have died, it's like a function. It's very in line with their metabolic health. So these things that, your response to blood sugar and weight and diabetes and all that is definitely coming into play, as we know.
So. Well, that was known. But I think the fact that the quality of your diet, independent of whether you're overweight or have diabetes, is also really important. And so that's probably why the US has had more problems than most other countries, because not only is an obese population, but also a junk food population.
Yeah. And so when you say quality of the diet, meaning what? Like all the things we talked about before, like diverse microbiome, would that be synonymous with high quality diet?
Yeah,
avoidance
it's just
for processed crap.
Yeah, it's everything that's not made from original ingredients. It's everything that's made from products of other products and stuck together, and you get your combined thing, which they add sugar and salt and various stimulants to make you overeat it, and all these chemicals together, generally low in fiber, low in polyphenols, low in anything that's good for your microbes. And it's also snacking. Average American has 6 or 7 meals a day. That's also not good. And if you hit your that's probably bad for your gut microbes, and that's bad for your immune system. So I think COVID has really brought lifestyle into focus again in a big way. And hopefully there will be some wake up call once we get over it.
Okay, who's inspiring you these days, and what are you most excited about in health and wellness?
I'm inspired by so many people, really all the scientists that I work with at Zoe, because the nice thing about having things like the predict studies is that everyone around the world wants to join us. So we have the best sleep experts, Matt Walker joining us. We have, collaborations with the restricted time eating people, Sasha Panda. I like the amazing things that the microbiome guys are doing, sorting out our microbes. Big team at Harvard doing that. So I'm just always inspired by all these other experts around us. And I still think the biggest thing in health and wellness at the moment is this combination of I think it's the gut microbes and personalization. Really, I think the gut microbes are like discovering a new organ in our bodies, and so all the specialties really need to feed into that. And it's a bit like rediscovering, ancient, Ayurvedic medicine, which they all said was focused on the gut, but no one knew why. And now we know why.
Very interesting. Is there any like probiotic technology or anything that's cool coming there that we should know about?
Well, they can put probiotics in nearly everything now. You can get probiotic chocolate.
Of course.
You can get, they're putting probiotic beer. I've seen someone looking at. You can, and I was asked interestingly because people there's 70 companies making laboratory meat now.
Oh, yeah.
Stem cell meat, and some of them contacted me about adding pre and probiotics to that laboratory meat to make it healthier. So I think these are going to be on our plates within 5 years. So there's going to be massive changes in what we eat in the next 5 years. So I think that's kind of cool that a stem cell burger cost $300,000 about 10 years ago, and you can buy a chicken stem cell burger in Singapore now for $25.
Yeah. So what do you think about this fake meat trend?
Well, it's fantastic for the planet. It's not going to be so good for our taste buds. But, biologically, it's going to be equivalent. And so I think it could fill the gap in the really rubbish processed meats that at the moment, I think shouldn't be eaten, but
so you're talking, like, because there's like the soy-based fake meat products that have like 60 ingredients in them. You're talking stem cell meat that's grown to replace.
Yes, so they're two separate things, but I'm actually all for stem cell meat that could replace cheap sausages and mince and things like that you wouldn't notice, right? So and that's good. That's going to be fantastic for the planet and global warming. The other thing about Impossible Burgers and Beyond Meat and these things, I think I do worry that they do have a lot of ingredients that might not be healthy for you, but I don't think they're any worse than the current equivalents. And they definitely are better, again, for the planet. And I think the other thing is they are educating people. There are, in a way, different ways to, think about food. And so it's broadening people's ideas. They don't have to be so rigid, and we don't, because it's simply impossible to keep eating the same amount of meat in the next generation as we have been.
Yeah.
And I think that so as an educational mindset, I think it's an important one. But I have reservations about all the other stuff they put in to make it taste more like meat. I wish they would just not make it taste quite as meat and just have it its own product. But there you go.
Yeah, I know. I look at some of that and I just call it like Frankenfood. I'm like, this is ridiculous. There's like 60 ingredients in here. I can't pronounce 58 of them. Like, I mean, I don't know. How could this be better than a grass-fed filet mignon? I'm not tracking, but,
Yeah, well, they never will be better than the best quality meats.
Right.
They might be better than the worst quality meats. So.
I like that approach. Okay. Let's see. 3 quick ones. What's your biggest failure to date? Because you seem like you got it figured out, man. You've done this like incredible twin study. You're a co-founder of this amazing company that is going to explode. I'm sure of it. Are there any failures we have in the life of Dr. Tim Spector?
Oh, plenty of failures, yes. Academics are always failing, and that's part of the job, is to fail to get big grants. I failed to. I worked in epigenetics for 5 years and failed to make any major discoveries there, and that's why I shifted. So you need failures to kick you out and do something else. Because I get bored easily, so I need these things. I failed life as a politician. So some of the things in COVID, I failed to convince, governments to do things that if I was less blunt, I would have done well. But I think life is full of successes and failures, and several companies I've started have bombed as well. So if you don't fail, you don't succeed. Is my view. So
I love it. Okay, what's one thing most people don't know about you?
Well, recently I've been doing so many interviews. I think everyone knows everything about me. But I would say. So I had a helicopter crash 4 years ago, which was exciting. Yeah, I was skiing in.
Or you were a passenger?
I was a passenger in a helicopter, and we crashed whilst we were heli skiing on landing, and it exploded and blew up. But
what?
Yeah, so that was, and that in a way made me realize, life is precious, and so you've got to get on and do stuff and enjoy it. And so that was a major turning point in my training. So rather than just settle down and retire and play golf, I said I'm going to do stuff I'm really passionate about, enjoy it, and it actually was a pretty good event for me, really. I felt so lucky to have escaped and lived, because generally it's about 50-50. If it crashes, it's so fragile. But the snow was soft, and we all got out alive.
So this helicopter crashed, and you guys all went running, and then it exploded after you got out of the way, or what happened here?
No, it was they were dropping us on the first landing, and the pilot made a mistake, and it flipped over and crashed down, and then the blades kept going round, and it caught fire, and it was.
Smokes! This is crazy.
Yeah,
but a life-changing event. It sounds like you took it as best as you could and used it as a pivot for positive change.
Yeah, I was bizarrely calm, and I even took a video of it. Which everyone else was running away in case it totally exploded whilst we were near it, but. I had a strange, calm feeling. It was very weird, which was.
I wonder if that's a result of your diverse microbiome. You were able to have that gut-brain connection and keep your cool.
Well, yeah, but some others would have said it was stupid. You should have run for cover. It was not. Maybe
very true.
Just just thinking my social media too much. I was just being
I love it.
Because I said no one will believe me. No one will believe me if I don't take a picture of it. So there you go.
That is insane. Wow. Yeah, I would not have guessed that one. That's a good one. I've asked quite a few of those questions, and that's an impressive one. Well, thank you so much. I won't take up any more of your time because I know you need to get back to changing the world through this diverse microbiome mission, but we're so happy to spend time with you today. I just want to remind everyone you can try the Blue Poop Challenge for yourself. Check out joinzoe.com. Tim's book, The Diet Myth, is also available on Amazon if you aren't ready to examine your poop just yet. And like I said, I've tried pretty much everything in the personalized health world, and I think this Zoe app is a phenomenal way to bring all of these technologies into your living room and really use it as effective change. So I highly encourage you guys to check it out. Thanks, everyone. Thank you, Tim, and we'll talk soon.
Thanks a lot. Bye.
Bye, guys.